Hey there, Will again. Thanks a lot for watching another video. So today I'm talking about dynamics in Dorico, but this is a far-reaching topic, which is really about how to make your music more expressive. And I want to talk about what I've learned about the way dynamics works in Dorico, because I don't feel this is really well covered in the huge volume of really helpful videos and tutorials that Steinberg's made. I haven't felt like this topic was really well addressed. So um, there are five main topics I want to talk about. First of all, how to choose which MIDI CC Dorico is focusing on with your dynamics. The second thing is, what is a secondary dynamic? I want to cover that. Nodes and override regions. So this is about this stuff over down here. If you can see my mouse, what is all that really about in those lanes? Why don't instruments always report the same dynamics that you are seeing in that you put markings in your score? Why aren't those always reported exactly as is in your instruments? I'll explain that. And then I'll also show you where you can find the settings that you might want to tinker with when you're working on this stuff, okay? So first of all, this question of how to choose Dorico's dynamics. Basically, that's going to be in your playback options. You can go, I think, up to the maybe library menu, down playback options. There it is, right there. Or you can just do Command-Shift-P, and that opens up this area here. So, well, actually, I'm sorry. This is not exactly where you find that information. Getting ahead of myself. That's where you'd find those settings you might want to tinker with. Choosing Dorico's dynamic CCs is really in your expression maps. So you'd want to go, for example, well, if you go now in, I think maybe it was either 5 or 5.1, there's this really handy little kind of quick jump button here to edit the expression maps on your instruments. You select it here in the play mode and crack that open. It's really awesome. So I have got this very basic expression map. I'm going to take myself off the camera here so you can see everything a little easier. But under my natural technique, I have over here my volume dynamic and my secondary dynamic. So the volume dynamic here is the first setting. Basically, whatever your dynamic markings are, do you want that to govern note velocity or a CC? Secondary dynamic I'll get to in just a minute, but let's just take a look at this. So right now I'm saying I want my volume dynamic to basically be translated by my software as MIDI CC1. And let's see what that really means. So what it really means is when we are in the write mode here, and I've got this arrangement of notes up here, just going through from quadruple P to fortissimo, quadruple F up there, right? And you can see down here in this dynamics lane, it's labeled dynamics, and you can see these little nodes here, and they're labeled. So what does that mean? What is that? Well, that is basically the dynamics lane is saying, okay, give me a graphical representation of what's going on in these dynamics markings that I have up in my score. And these are sort of arbitrary. They're basically on a scale from -6 to +6. So -6 would be 6 Ps, -5 would be 5 Ps, -1 is 1 P for piano, +1 is forte. That's a little arbitrary because that doesn't really mean anything to a musician or a composer. But they get translated basically into some 1 through 127 MIDI value. And we can see basically a repeat or a duplicate of this sort of stepped structure that's in the dynamics lane. We can see that down here in the CC1 lane. It's actually editable here, but it's showing me more or less the same thing. And I'm going to take this graphic off so you can see that all more easily as well. This gray line that's down at the bottom here, I've got a CC1 lane enabled. And so because I selected CC1 back here in play, sorry, I'm just going to go to my play, and I'm going to crank open my expression map. Over here, because I selected 1, now if I select, say, 11, which is typical expression, and then I hit OK. What we'd notice is back in write mode, lo and behold, the stepped thing is no longer down here in the CC1 lane, but it's in the CC11 lane. So that's how you choose what Dorico is, which MIDI CC Dorico is using. Now, what's the secondary dynamic all about? So if we were to go back to play and we crank open our expression map and I choose my articulation and I were to enable use secondary dynamic, and I said, okay, I also want this to go to 1. What might be actually more typical would be that my primary dynamic would be 1, and sorry, my mouse isn't cooperating here, and my secondary might be 11, okay? Now what you're going to see is that there's actually a duplicate in both. So in write, you'll see now I have one down here in CC1, and I also have one in CC11. And that means that those values represented by this dynamics lane here are going to be sent to my MIDI instrument via MIDI CC11 and MIDI CC1. That's the way that's going to work. Now, I do have another option, which is to set it to velocity. So sometimes on velocity is the way we want to control dynamics. You can do that as well, but I generally recommend against that because on velocity has no continuous control, whereas CCs do. So let's talk a little bit about using that continuous control. Nodes and override regions. What's that all about? So if I wanted, for example, this not to be a stepped value here, but I wanted it to, I don't know, be squirrely, what I can do is I can choose to my little pencil tool up here, and I can go down here and I can just draw in whatever I want. And you can see it kind of highlights it in blue. What's highlighted is a very faded blue, but what's highlighted there is what's called an override region. And what that means is that no matter what my markings are up here in the notation, this is what's going to be sent to CC11. Now, if I do that to CC1, which would, in most instruments, change my velocity layers, my dynamics in the instrument, that's going to override whatever dynamics I have written. So in other words, the dynamic markings, they form this original gray line. But anything that's highlighted in blue that I've drawn in or recorded in with a fader, those will always override on playback, will always override the written markings. And I may not want that. So in those cases, I would have to delete those regions. And you'll see that when I delete that, the blue highlighting goes away. So that's what nodes and override regions are. Actually, I didn't really talk about nodes. These are nodes. And in the dynamics, dynamic editor here, this lane, each node represents literally one of the markings. And you can see as I choose a node, it selects a different marking up there. So a node is a marking, and you're seeing what that marking represents on this arbitrary scale of -6 to +6. So that's nodes and override regions. Now, why don't instruments always report dynamics exactly as written? This is a little complicated, but essentially I had to make a list here. In the settings, which if you go to Command-Shift-P or you go to Playback Options, you would see here, where is it? Sorry, not Playback Options, I guess. It should be in Playback Options. Let me take myself off the screen again. But there is actually, oh, there it is, in the Dynamics area. There's all this stuff down here about pitch, contour, emphasis. There's this stuff about note dynamics. There's a few other things. There's this curve power up here. These are all different things that are put into Dorico to basically try to make the playback more expressive, sort of like a Note Performer Lite built in, right? And it works really well for the most part. But here's the thing you really want to know about this is that those settings can slightly change what you get. So you might have forte written in your score and you don't have any override regions written down there in your lanes, and yet you're seeing forte in the score, you're not seeing forte in your VST instrument. That could be because note dynamics, because pitched, contour, emphasis, that pitch or the dynamics curve. Could be all those settings kind of basically trying to mangle things real time to try to make the playback sound more human, sound a little more real. There's some humanization features in there essentially, but those do change those settings. And that can be a good thing if you want to improve your playback. But don't be surprised if sometimes you're not seeing a one-for-one match. That's not entirely uncommon in my experience. So where are some of these settings? I had actually just shown them. So Command Shift P. Let me take myself off, or go to playback options. Under dynamics over here, this is where you're going to find dynamic, curve, humanize, so on and so forth. These are the different settings you could tinker with. I mentioned earlier that the dynamics are on this kind of arbitrary scale of -6 to 6. This is where those are set. So you can go in there and tinker with those. I find that basically the defaults are fine. Knowing how this all worked on the lanes, knowing how I could override them, which CC was really being sent. That was all the stuff I really wanted to cover today. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. If you have any topics you'd like me to cover, please leave those in the comments. Please like and subscribe the video if you found it helpful. I need more subscribers, and I want to surface my videos to more people. So thanks again so much for watching, and I will see you next time. All right, bye.